lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. So now we'll do the roll call. Councillor Trish Purdy, District 4.
Well, good morning, Madam Chair and colleagues and everyone. Good to be here.
Good morning. Councillor Lindell Smith, District 8.
Hey, folks, happy to be here.
Oh, I like that. Happy to be here is good. Councillor Lisa Blackburn, District 14.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Coming to you live from beautiful downtown Beaverbank.
Awesome. And our Vice Chair, Alana Baxter.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Joseph Allen. Do we have Joseph with us? Maybe we'll come back. Alex Handyside.
Hello, yes. Good morning, Madam Chair from District 5.
Good morning, Alex. And Stefan Ludin has sent his regrets. And Leona Milne has also sent regrets. Emily Jackson.
Good morning.
Good morning, Emily. With Joseph, Stefan, and Leona not here, Katie, I just want to make sure we're still confirmed for quorum.
Yep, we still have quorum.
Thank you very much. So approval of the minutes of our last meeting, which was June 8th, 2022. Any errors or omissions? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Move.
I move. Second?
Okay, I think I saw Trish as a mover and seconder Lisa. Great. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed may say nay. Glad there's none saying opposed. And now we'll go to the approval of the order of business and the approval of additions or deletions. Katie, do we have any additions or deletions?
There are no additions or deletions.
Thank you so much. So now may we have a motion to approve the order of business?
So motioned.
Thank you. Alana, first and seconder, please.
Second.
Thank you, Trish. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed may say nay. We've got none of them. So business arising out of the minutes, we have none. Call for a declaration of conflict of interests. Does anyone feel a conflict of interest? Hearing none, we can move on. Consideration of deferred business is none. Next is correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Katie, do we have any correspondence that's been received by the clerk's office?
There's been no correspondence received.
Thank you. Petitions, do we have any petitions?
There was also no petitions received.
Any members of the committee have any petitions? Nope, good. Presentations, we have none. Information items, none. And so that brings us to reports 9.1, which is the less than market value land lease for the West Halifax Housing Cooperative Limited, lot BRH-2, Regent Road, Halifax. Someone care to put the motion on the floor for discussion?
I can do that since it's a short one.
Thank you very much, Alex. Go for it.
That the Grants Committee recommend that Halifax Regional Council approve the entering into of a less than market value land lease agreement with West Halifax Housing Cooperative Limited, located at lot BRH-2 Regent Road, Halifax, as per the key terms and conditions set out in Table 1 in the discussion section of this report, and that Council authorize the Mayor and Municipal Clerk to execute the less than market value land lease agreement.
Seconder?
Second?
Thank you, Lisa. Any discussion on the motion? Oh, thank you, Lisa.
No, just a quick question. I don't know if Sean from real estate is on the call, but just wondering why a 25-year term, and my apologies if I missed that in the report. Is 25 just sort of the standard that we do to review after 25 years, or just wondering where that
something to do with a
Yeah.
federal grant, wasn't it?
Yeah, hey, it's Mike Cooper here, Madam Chair and committee members. Thanks for having me today. Sean's not able to be here, so I work with him in corporate real estate. Yeah, typically we do use a 20-year template for these kinds of agreements. However, they were working out some commitments with the federal government, which required a longer term. So it was basically to aid in their acquisition of funds for various capital improvements.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
I had a question too about this. Because they came to council with one request and council returned with a completely different offer, albeit it does fit in with what they did want. Are they on board with this new offer?
Mike, you're going to answer that for us, please?
Yeah, exactly. Thanks again, Madam Chair, to the committee member. Yeah, typically when we bring these terms and conditions forward, the tenants have agreed to the terms. So we don't bring recommendations forward until all parties are agreeable to the terms.
That was my question. Thanks very much.
Are there any other questions? Oh, Elena, thank you. I see your hand. Oh, you're mute. You're on mute.
Haven't done that in a while. Needed a reminder. I noted that in the previous agreement that the organization, it seemed that they needed to get a mortgage to ensure that maintenance, general repairs, maintenance, cleaning, etc., would be taken care of. And I know with the new assessment or new agreement, that the organization is going to be responsible for all of those costs. And I just wonder, what if that condition wasn't honored by the organization? Or do we monitor that? With the mortgage, it seemed to be more of a guarantee, whereas with this, it's just left to the organization. And we are dealing with, I think, vulnerable populations here. So that's my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mike, do you feel you can answer that one for us?
Yeah, I can cover it off. Thanks, Madam Chair, to the committee member. It's not uncommon for these longer term leases to aid in the securing of financial agreements with other financial institutions. In fact, it allows for more preferable terms. So that's why, again, as you said, when we're working with these vulnerable type populations, that we have these longer terms that allow them flexibility. So there is wording, in fact, in the lease that'll cover off things such as mortgages or other kinds of securities that they could use to secure financing. So as part of the lease, as part of our monitoring program.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, shall we call for the question?
Question.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed may say nay. Hearing none, motion is carried. Thank you. And next we go to the more lengthy motion, 9.1.3, which is the tax relief for nonprofits 2022. And if someone would like to put the motion on the floor, that would be great. I see that we do have PJ Temple here to help answer questions as well.
All right. I can do that, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
All right. I move that the Grants Committee recommend that Regional Council, 1, approve the addition of 13 properties to Administrative Order 2014-001-ADM as detailed in the discussion section of this report at an estimated combined cost of $207,273 from operating account M311-8006. 2, approve an increase in the level of tax relief for 12 housing properties at a combined cost of $33,093 as detailed in the discussion section of this report. 3, approve 4 one-time grants in support of 4 properties developed under the auspices of the Federal Rapid Housing Initiative Program. Phase 1 and Phase 2, as listed in the discussion section of the report, at an estimated combined cost of $16,692 from operating account M311-8006. 4, suspend the application of Section 7C and 7D of Administrative Order 2014-001-ADM in fiscal year 2022-23 by amending the administrative order as set out in Attachment 2 of this report. 5, approve records management corrections and amendments as listed in the discussion section of this report and as set out in Attachment 2 of this report. And 6, adopt the amendments to Administrative Order 2014-001-ADM as set out in Attachment 2 of this report, including adopting Attachments A through E attached to Attachment 2 and repeal and replace Schedules 26, 27, 28, I'm assuming that should be 29 and 30 of the administrative order. I so move.
Seconder, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Birdie. Thank you, Trish. I'm sure that we've got lots of questions on this one. If we could use the chat, that way my eye won't have to try to find the hands coming up, and I'll be able to follow and make sure we got everybody in order to ask their questions. But before we start, PJ, that little edit there where we put, is it 29 and 30, just to make sure that that's correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, that's correct. That was a typo.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great. So lots of questions, I'm sure.
Well, I could start.
Okay. Thank you,
Some
PJ.
silence
You're
on that.
looking very busy behind you there.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about the backlash. Yeah. It's at the top of my head, the talking head. So for me, a couple of highlights, I think. The default of the renewal, the confirmation form, is clearly an issue. And that's why it seems a contradiction to say, well, suspend the recourse, which is referenced there in motion number 4. But we're talking of over 100 properties here. Last year, we were fortunate there was only 9 organizations and 9 properties. The total here is probably closer to 100 properties. And I think really we need to look at this issue when we look at a redesign of the program and a new administrative order. We simplified the form. It's literally 1 page. But even at that, some appear to have difficulties in filling that out. We've received some forms that don't have a name or an assessment account number. We can't even trace who it was. In most cases, when we've talked to people who responded to our registered mail, it seems to be volunteer turnover or staff turnover. But if you look at Attachment 3, we've listed them by the individual schedules, and I don't think there's a clear correlation between they're tax exempt, so why bother, or they have paid staff. You know, what are the issues here? It seems to be, again, an issue of self-management. And perhaps after the redesign, if we get to a point where we have a guidebook for the program, I think that's where we could give some assistance to them. It could be this needs to be written into a job description, whether it be for a volunteer or a member of staff. And also emphasizing these grants, tax grants, are to the organization, not to an individual. There seems to be an over-reliance on perhaps individuals. Picking up mail on a regular basis. Some will have a post office box, others not. But I do think we have to look again at this element. I think we need an incentive for people to comply with the program, perhaps a combination of sticks and carrots, but without that reminder, I think that's how we've come to this point. So it is requesting council suspend just for this year the application of that part of policy. And I think in the redesign, we need to take a second look at what can work. Maybe maybe prorating isn't the way to do it. There may be something easier and faster, but definitely this is an issue we need to address. We don't have the capacity to monitor their compliance for them. So I think that's a bigger issue there. The second issue this year, the budget, you can see in the financial implications section, we've exceeded the budget allocation for this program in this year. We've tried to give an explanation to the best that we can demonstrate. I think a lot of this is due to generally a lot of activity, particularly in the residential market. There's been significant government investment, particularly in housing, but also there have been a few recreation facilities that have received significant sums of money. So that capital investment into buildings, largely buildings, has increased the cost of renewals. That's the bulk of where that cost increase came from. And, to be fair, we've got probably 800 properties here. So anything that's on waterfront property, whether it's coastal, lake, river frontage, those are always scarce and high demand. And we've got quite a bit of activity in the urban core and growth communities where property values will be higher. So we need to watch for that in this year's budget deliberations. And the rapid housing grants, last year you would have seen 3 listed. Those were phase 1. And it did use the term one-time grants. And I think that could be confusing for people. My best guess is that term one-time was probably in anticipation of having a new program in place for this year. Clearly, we don't. So we are recommending a continuation of that in this year. So we're adding one in there, which is a rather large one, the Affordable Housing Association of Nova Scotia. They bought the former Travel Lodge in Dartmouth. That right now is assessed commercial. So if that is going to change to a residential assessment, it would change in next year's tax roll. I would point out there is one group that applied for a one-time rapid housing grant. That's Acoma Holdings Incorporated. The issue that and you don't see them listed there, we have talked to them and we'll be meeting with them on Friday. They'll be coming here for an in-person meeting. The challenge for that property is they have 2 buildings on one PID. The new housing buildings will add to the number of those buildings on one PID. And so it's really difficult for us to separate which part of that relates only to the housing component. So that's why we need to talk to them and see what we can sort out there. So it's not meant to ignore them. It's not dismissive. It's not of lesser value than the others. It is strictly a logistics. And we haven't been able to determine whether in fact there is an assessment for that housing component in this tax year. Certainly there should be in 2023. So those are the big highlights from a staff perspective, and happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much, PJ. So first on our list is Councillor Brody. Trish.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much, PJ. Your job is really, really important, and there's a lot of moving pieces and very complex. So
Yes.
I have a couple questions. The first one is just Schedule 28 and Schedule 30, they're both reductions of 50% at the residential rate. Schedule 28 has 0 number of properties under it, and Schedule 30 has 5. So I was just wondering if you could explain what the difference is, because it looks like they're both the same thing. So that was just, I didn't understand that. And also scrolling down to find it. So last week, I was invited along with other counselors to the Bedford Sobeys tennis recreational facility, and it was amazing. It was really impressive. And here, so number 28, page 12 of the report, it says that the recommendation is to defer their tax relief to 2023. And that option for them this year is for like a payment plan, a monthly payment plan. Could you just flesh that out and explain that? Why is it recommended for them to be deferred to 2023? And is there any way that there could be some help for them this year? And thank you for explaining about Akuma as well. I was going to ask you about what to do with that, two different properties on one PID. So
Right.
already steps ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so let's start with Schedule 28 and Schedule 30. So it used to be that Schedule 28, and still is, that's a reduction to 50% of the residential rate. What's important to bear in mind is there are organizations with properties on that schedule that are assessed commercial. So in fact, for them, the formula for their tax grant is a two-step process. So you would convert it from the commercial to the residential rate, which is roughly a 2/3 saving, and then they'd get an additional 50%. Schedule 30, which are all residential properties. These are rental properties. We might refer to them as affordable housing. They used to get a 25% reduction at the residential rate, and last year, council increased that to 50%. Okay, so strictly speaking, if you were, I don't know, let's say a daycare and you were on Schedule 28, you'd actually get a higher than 50% total reduction of your tax if you're converting it from commercial. Whereas the housing groups, typically they're at residential rate, so it's a straight reduction. But personally, and I think this is something that hopefully we'll bring forward and discuss more in our redesign, I find the numbering and the naming of schedules counterintuitive. I mean, why are we starting at 26? It's using technical tax terms, residential, commercial, 99.9% of the viewing public wouldn't have a clue. And I think in some ways it almost underrepresents the level of tax relief that other taxpayers are providing to these organizations. So our hope is that we can convert that to plain language, and that will help guide people's expectations when they're applying, and having clear criteria and clearer naming might help guide them and navigate them a little better. And staff too. I mean, trying to explain this to other staff members. It's not just you. Second, in terms of the Regional Tennis Center, they are in the program. They are on Schedule 29, so they would get a conversion from the commercial to residential rate, roughly a 2/3 saving. They've asked for an increase to 100%. So it's the increase that we're recommending. We defer that consideration to next year. And our goal would be, hopefully, we might have a new program in place by then. So we're going under status quo today. The reason that we're recommending a deferral is, and this is part of the inconsistency in the current program, the current schedules. So bear with me, I'm going to go back a little bit in history. Before amalgamation, the Halifax County really didn't have the commercial tax base or the population. So typically you wouldn't have seen cash grant programs there. They tended to assist nonprofit groups through tax relief if they owned the property, or maybe less than market value leases, particularly for land. So in that context, many of those, particularly recreation sport clubs and maybe community halls, were providing alternate service delivery. There wasn't a public facility on every street corner, right? At amalgamation, under bylaw T200, which was a bylaw initially back in 1996, they were carried forward. And so you'll see many of those on Schedule 26. What I can't explain is Schedule 29 also has sport groups in it, particularly tennis clubs, sailing clubs, and curling clubs. And even some community centers that appear to be ethnic based. So why? And I think the main part is when it's a bylaw, in order to change a bylaw, you had to have a public hearing. And so some organizations took advantage of the public hearing, came, presented their case to council. And so you might have a decision of council in that context, in that one meeting. And so over the years, you've got these inconsistencies. It causes frustration. It's hard to explain. There is an explanation, but it's lengthy. And invariably, most people I want what they've got. So when we look at the regional tennis center, yes, it's sheer scale, the land values in the Bedford area, the newness of the building. It's a new building. The building hasn't started to depreciate in value yet. So yes, their tax bill is high. But then so is South Lawn Tennis Club. It's not the same, but they're on Yonge Street in Halifax. I mean, those are high property values. So it's really, if you were to change theirs, why would you change only theirs and not all the other tennis clubs? Or why only tennis? Why not curling or sailing? So that's why we're saying, well, let's wait, do the reorganization. And then we've got like with like within each of those categories. And those categories then have their own criteria. The schedules have their own criteria. And that should help reduce what I might describe as lobbying or self-representation, because we know the ability for self-representation is going to vary significantly. If you look at the range of groups, some have paid staff, some entirely volunteer, that risks inequity in terms of one's ability to self-represent. So if we redesign the program, it should take out some of that debate. It's small consolation to them by saying we can assist through a payment plan, but that would assist through, in a payment plan for the committee members, you can pay your taxes in monthly installments. So that should ease your cash flow a little bit. And yes, I get the frustration. Well, I want what soccer's got, or I want what paddling gets. And that is something that we've inherited and frankly perpetuated through the years. And I think we're now at the point where we have to go, time out. We need a redesign. This is unfair and confusing. And in terms of a Comer, again, I think there's a challenge for them. They have a very large land holding. And it's a balance because you're trying not to dictate to somebody, this is how you shall develop your property, but being able to sit down in person with them and explaining the challenges from a tax perspective, and looking at possible solutions with them. It's also been informative too, and again, we'll go over this with them. They have some tenancy on that site. So again, I think that's important to bring forward in some fashion, the number of organizations that have been assisted through this program indirectly, because their tenants will receive the same level of tax relief they do, regardless of what the tenant is. The tenant has to be nonprofit or charity. So when we talk of 200 or 300 organizations in the current program, it's actually more than that. It's probably another 100 more that are receiving the benefit of tenancy. And we put that in policy as an incentive. We know you might be able to get more in revenue from a commercial tenant, but this way we're encouraging, could you accommodate a nonprofit or a charity? And I think it also poses less risk to them in terms of paying the commercial tax. So that's where we are with the Comer. And again, I think we would really save a lot of time by a face-to-face meeting. I don't honestly know today what the solution is longer term as they develop their lands, but I think starting a conversation now so that if you're going to make a change, let's discuss that before, not after the fact. It leaves us scrambling.
Thank you, PJ.
Yeah.
Councilor Bertie, do you feel answered?
Oh my goodness, fully. PJ, you're awesome. Thank you.
My background is not a chartered accountant. But so there's hope. There's hope for all. I'm surrounded by those that are, but it really is trying to make this easier for everybody to understand. There's a barrier right there. And I think we can do much to improve it. It will never be perfect. Nobody's going to be totally happy. But I think if we were able to introduce consistency, better able to manage expectations, it's progress, right?
Thank you. Thank you, PJ. Councillor Blackburn, Lisa, you're up next.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And PJ, you do not give yourself enough credit. You are not a chartered accountant. You just play one on television. It's really, for me, hard to believe that these schedules still are, a leftover dog's breakfast from pre-amalgamation. So it's a huge job, I think, trying to pull this together. And I just wanted to touch on something that you said earlier on about problems getting the applications in. Is this a longer term trend that you have been seeing, or has this been more or less a result of COVID? Because I know a lot of our nonprofits, a lot of our volunteer groups took a serious hit, lost a lot of volunteers, and it's left a lot of groups scrambling. So wondering if this problem getting the applications is a trend that you've been seeing over the longer term, or whether this is more of a COVID thing. Thank you.
So I'll start with the change again for the viewing public. It used to be that you filled out a renewal form and submitted a financial statement every year. Again, perception versus reality. I think that caused a lot of anxiety with groups who saw a renewal as being, if you don't fill your form out, you're out of the program. We were taking in thousands of sheets of paper and not having a clue, what are we supposed to do with this? What am I looking for? Is there a requirement under legislation to report the value of your tax relief? No. We're just perpetuating, we've always done it this way, and nobody told us to change. So we simplified that and trying to get the message. Once you're accepted into the program, you have to give us reason to remove you from the program. To your point about COVID, yes, I'm sure that did have an impact for some. And perhaps part of it is distraction. Are we trying to stay afloat? Are we trying to reschedule board meetings where we can make changes? And not all the groups will be able to use this kind of technology to meet virtually. So that is a complicating factor. But again, when I look through attachment 3 with the list of the organizations, I can't help but think some of this is around their own organizational capacity, and that includes those with paid staff. So there is a risk that if we don't apply some kind of penalty, we perpetuate that behavior, and why bother? So it's about finding a balance. We may, through the new computer system that Revenue has, we could look at, are we able to send automated reminders? We have 2 full-time staff for grants and contributions. This program could be a full-time job in and of itself, partly because of its complexity and the sheer volume. So we have to find ways that are efficient. And I think we have to find consequences that are meaningful to the group without being too harsh and overly bureaucratic. So that's the challenge that lies ahead of us.
Yeah, it's a fine line.
It is.
Yep.
And again, I would say, I think some of the groups, they don't operate perhaps as they should as a collective board of directors. And so often you'll see, well, Norman goes to Florida for 3 months and Sandra's got a cold. But,
Yeah.
right. So, are there techniques that they could use? Is there a prompt that we could use? Because this is a lot of work. when you're spreading it over 200-300 groups and 800 plus properties.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge ahead of us. And clearly, I think when we said, well, we'll give you till June 30th, and the confirmation form comes in October with the second bill, maybe that gap is too long for them. There's too much time spent. Well, we'll get to that later, and we never do. So, what kind of combination can we put in place, see how that works? But I don't think we are able to just say, oh, well, don't bother. Like, we have a monitoring duty to the public for a program costing over $5 million.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. Appreciate your team's willingness to tackle this challenge, because it is extremely, this program is a lot of times it's make or break for a lot of these community
Yes.
groups. So it's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Our Vice Chair, Alana Baxter. Alana, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to echo the acknowledgement by Councillor Blackburn and Councillor Purdy around the incredible amount of work that goes into this, just preparing the report. And I don't have a thorough appreciation of, I'm gaining one based on your explanation now, the back and forth with community organizations. So thank you also. Around communication, possible strategies, and just considering the recent survey that was circulated and has been circulated with community groups and so forth. I'm just we talked in the past during one of these meetings about how the city used to do face-to-face orientation meetings on different grant opportunities and so forth. And it was suggested, and it was consistent with my own experience in different roles I've had with the province, that orientation sessions aren't always well attended beyond core partners that are funded over and over again. And I also think the proposed revisions to a handbook sounds like a great idea. I just wonder if, in addition to, and another great suggestion brought forward today was around the possibility of automated reminders. As you proposed, PJ, was that there does tend to be turnover in volunteer organizations. And so that may not catch everyone, those automated reminders. I'm just wondering, given at least my limited attention span at times, if there might be an opportunity to complement revised handbook to access online with a 30-second shareable, 30 to 60 second, from what I gather, you can share a 30 to 60 second video to complement a revised handbook that can be shared over social media or whatever. Certainly, I've tried to share things, funding opportunities. It's just, as has already been acknowledged, when I see some of the organizations that are being supported by all of the different funding opportunities through this committee and through the city, it saddens me to hear that some have missed the boat because they missed the deadlines or because of incomplete applications or whatever. And so that's what I propose, is maybe consideration be given to the city to invest a little bit of money just to create a 30 to 60 second vignette to complement or summarize or draw people's attention to a revised handbook. Just a suggestion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Hey, do we have a response to that one, or?
Yes, Madam Chair, to the committee. Not to be confused, the survey that was out recently was for the Community Grants Program.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's a new administrative order, but personally, I do think that it would be appropriate if we introduce, let's say, an orientation package. So for new organizations new to the program, that would be one tool. I have no objection to an online video. And again, I think a handbook would be really helpful for a program of this scale and complexity. So I think there are tools and communication methods. I do think too, this is a larger issue for the organization, navigation, finding your way, not just from the public trying to access information on municipal assistance programs, but within the organization itself. So I think that an interdepartmental approach might be preferable to the larger issue of navigation. And then each of us does our part with respect to our programs. So certainly I think there's lots of techniques we can use. And I don't think we'll ever eliminate all barriers. An online video that might reach a different audience. To your point, Councillor, sending out automated reminders. We have many people who are volunteers. You're sending an automated reminder to their cell phone. We can't create a listserv because, well, one, we don't have the staffing capacity to manage it. But two, again, you've got the privacy issues with people using personal email addresses. So I think it's going to be a combination of different things, you know, and hopefully one or two of those land, and coaching, but really having the groups call or email us is really that one-to-one coaching. It is sometimes very important for groups. Our latest example there, Acoma, you can only do so much coaching by email or memos, but actually sitting down with them with the property plan, with their larger vision, with the people from the board who have responsibility. You know, love to do workshops, but again, it comes down to a capacity issue. And to your point, Councillor, even a face-to-face workshop isn't for everybody, and there are limitations there in terms of people's ability to get to the site or have their specific questions answered. So, you know, if we could bring 80% up to self-managing, then we could do more case management for the 20% who are struggling.
Thank you, PJ. You're good with that, Alana?
I'm very good with that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Awesome.
Ms.
Awesome.
Temple.
And our next person up is Alex Headyside. Alex, you have a question.
It's not really a question. It's more of a statement that on page 16, PJ, the very last line is a link. The link is broken. I don't know if that link is promulgated anywhere else, but the link should include the word resources. If you can see, that's on the next line, and it's actually not part of the link, and it should be.
Oh, God. Yeah. I'll have my techie colleagues
work that one out.
Well, again, this comes down to navigation, and this is not a criticism of HRM or corporate communications, but, you know, thinking from the public, from a customer perspective, doing business with HRM isn't somewhere I would look if I'm a nonprofit.
Not easy.
And then, you know, a handle this long,
Yeah.
trying to make a link. So I think those are the types of things, simplifying, consistency. It's all part of the various combinations. But again, we need to talk with corporate communications and try to use simple language as well. I mean, tax is highly technical. We need some translation in there to help people's comprehension and their confidence of knowing what exactly did I sign on to. So, you know, much work ahead. And I would also like to say as a shout out, I would like to thank Andre McNeil, who is literally propping us up from afar, working remotely from Winnipeg, getting us through this year's status quo.
Wow.
couldn't have done it without him.
Wow.
So, you know, in our revenue department with the new computerized system, they'll become more integrated with this program. So, you know, there's hope on the horizon. We're going to dig ourselves out of this and move forward. But I would say change is challenging in and of itself. But we give it our best shot. I don't think it could get much worse. If only we did nothing, right? We're just going to compound and compound until we're buried. So I think, to your point, Councillor Blackburn, yes, we've been perpetuating this for many years. And now we've got to a point where I think we have to call a timeout and say, no more changes to tax, no more variations on a theme. Let's get our arms around this and then move forward from there.
Awesome. Thank you, PJ. I have no other persons in the chat for a question. You know, having been on the other side of this and a person who has many times applied for tax relief. And, you know, when I was a tenant as a nonprofit in a leased experience, I remember talking to PJ about how do I get tax relief? So I've been on the other side of that, and I just know how helpful the staff, PJ, you and your staff are to nonprofits. And that phone call saves a lot of money for many nonprofits and a lot of angst as well. So I really appreciate that. But now being on this side of the table, one of the things that I think that we as counselors can do is make sure that, you know, end of May, 1st of June, our May e-newsletters or June e-newsletters, maybe we'll make it a standing item to say, nonprofits, have you filled out your confirmation form? And maybe we can get the Heidi at our office to come up with a nice graphic for us that we can make sure that that's in every May and June e-newsletter. And that way we'll actually be able to be helpful as well. I know I read with interest the report when it comes out, and I look to see, is there any nonprofits in my district? And, you know, do they have all of their stuff in or not? So we can be helpful as well, I think. But yeah, amazing job again. Thank you so much, PJ. You're a wealth of knowledge. I worry about, don't retire for at least another couple of years, okay? Because we need your history.
Baby. Well, actually, that is part of the redesign. It's about succession planning.
Yes.
This is a critical point of weakness, and that's not meant to be self-depreciating. So yeah, let's get going. I did promise Councillor Mason I wouldn't retire until we got the redesign done. So
Good.
okay there. I do have a favor to ask, if I may, of you, Madam Chair. In terms of the communication, Council's capacity to reach across this entire region, to me, is phenomenal. And I was wondering if I sent you a memo today, if you could make an announcement at Council tomorrow. The viewing audience of a regional council meeting has to be, or was, 30,000. It's probably more than that now that your meetings are recorded. So I could go and watch a video after the fact. So again, we have that capacity. We have these existing means of reaching different audiences. And I think the more techniques we can use, statistically, the better we're going to be. So
It would be my pleasure to do that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, great. So no more questions. Shall we call for the question?
Question.
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed may say nay. Hearing none, motion carried. And just for the group, there was a quick little email that came from Joseph saying apologies at the last minute he couldn't attend the meeting. So just so we have that on the record. And our next item then, and again, thank you, PJ and team. Committee member updates, there are none. Added items, I don't see any. And the date of our next meeting is October 17th, 2022. So with that, having had a lovely hour conversation and discussion, I'd ask for and call for an adjournment. Lindell.
Motion to adjourn.
I think I saw Lindell's hand up. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, PJ. Thank you, Katie, Emily, everybody that's